Let's start with a word of prayer and then we will go into the lesson. Father, we thank you that you gathered us together again to study into your word. We pray, Lord, that you will teach us at this time, because this is not an easy passage to comprehend, because there are also a lot of things that is there that is pertaining to our days, and we ask, Lord, for your Holy Spirit's enlightenment. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, last week we talked about Daniel 11, and I think I got some feedback that it wasn't very clear. Okay, so last week I gave a lot of details. This week I will repeat what I said, but less details. If you want all the details, what I would advise you to do is take last week's recording, and then all the details are there on the screen. Okay, now Ellen G. White warned us and told us this. He said that the Bible has a lot of pearls and treasures, and the treasures are for the last days, the last generation, this last generation. Okay, and what she is also adding in this place is saying all the events that is given in especially the Old Testament, okay, of the Old Testament itself, will be repeated again in our church in the last days. So things that we see in the Old Testament will be repeated. And in Gospel Workers, she said that study Revelation in connection with Daniel, because history will be repeated. And she used this phrase again and again. Okay, history will be repeated. So we have to learn. All right. In these two are the same quote. Okay, in one of her letters in the manuscript release, she said the same thing. Okay, she said we got no time to lose. Troublous times are before us. The world is astir with the spirit of war. Okay, and then she says the prophecies of Daniel 11, that's where we are. Okay, has almost reached the complete fulfillment. Okay, this was in 1904. She said Daniel 11 has almost reached the fulfillment. But then she says this, okay, much of the history that's taken place in the fulfillment will be repeated. And she specified, repeated in a 30th verse. So in other words, from verse 30 onwards up to 45 and Daniel 12, those prophecies there has been fulfilled, but it will be repeated. And so we want to make sure that we understand what is happening. Okay, because these type of things will take place again. And she said, okay, events, what she was saying, that the events that has been fulfilled already been fulfilled, but they will actually come back again. In Daniel 30, 39 itself, we see a power, a persecuting power. Okay, we are looking at, says, the 1,260 years prophecy. During the 1,260 years prophecy, the papacy went about, okay, controlling the rest of the world, persecuting whoever goes against it, okay, until end of it, when the French Revolution took part, okay, 1798, and then that part is over. But what Ellen G. White says is that these events will repeat itself. Okay, so when we look at Daniel 11 verses 30 to 39, what we are looking is the past career, what had happened in the past by the papacy, and then the 1140 to 45 will be the future career. So that is a warning for us. We have to study and really understand what's happening. We have studied this before. We know that in Daniel, they actually give us a few time prophecies. And each of the time prophecy is very important to us. They have a starting date, an ending date, and we have to look out, because some of these things will also repeat itself. Okay, and we are now living in the time of the end. Actually, we are more in the end of time, almost closing to the time of close of probation and second coming. So it becomes more real, and the things that's happening there will definitely repeat itself. So you want to be careful. All right. Now, let's go. Okay, we are going to look at in the last days. In the last days, you'll find that Israel is no longer a small little country. When they talk about Israel, they're talking about all the whole world's Christians will be there. And the prophecies will be for that time itself. Okay, I will come back to this chart again later on. Okay, all right, for those who just joined us, let me repeat what I said. Okay, last week we went through a lot of details. Okay, what I'm going to do is, because some of you did not fully understand it, I'm going to go back again on some of the events to highlight it, and so that you can have a better picture, so that you will be prepared, especially for the last part of Daniel 11, because Daniel 11, 30 and below are something that is pertaining to us. But in order to understand the interpretations, in order not to be swayed by other people, there are certain rules that we want to know, and I'm repeating them. We have mentioned these rules before. First of all, when you read the Bible, if the Bible, when you read it, if the Bible makes sense as it is, then we should be understood as something that is literal. Okay. For example, if you look at Daniel 11, verse 1 and 2, when you look at it, there's nothing that is symbolic. Everything is very literal. So we know that this has to be literal. Okay, so when we read it, we understand it as literal. Unlike, says, Daniel 8. Daniel 8, they got all sorts of symbols coming up. A ram, a he-goat, and so on. Those we know are symbols. Then we look at that as symbolic. Okay. In fact, in Daniel 11 has to be more or less literal, because it's an interpretation that Gabriel is using to explain. It's like when we read the Bible, you look at the symbols, you don't understand. But when you look at Ellen G's writing, she make it literal. Okay, so when we read, her writing is literal in the interpretation of what the Bible has symbolized. That's the first principle. Okay, another principle, especially in Daniel 11, is this. Okay, be very alert on the pronouns, because Daniel uses the pronouns. Sometimes he may not realize what he's doing, but he uses the pronouns, and sometimes he get a little bit careless. So when we look at in Daniel 11, okay, when two countries are fighting, A and B, if B wins, in the next verse, they will talk about B, country B, instead of talking about country A. So for example, over here in verse 2, in verse 2 itself, they were talking about the king of Persia. The king of Persia stood up and he went against the country of Greeks, and they fought. And in history, we know that Greek won. And therefore, because Greek is the winner, the next verse has to be talking about that winner, the victor. And it's true. In verse 3, they talk about a mighty king. Now, if you don't understand what this basic principle, and then we look at verse 2, they get confused. Okay, in verse 2, there's a battle. The victor is the Greek. So in the next verse itself, they will talk about the Greek. The loser is pushed aside. So in verse 3, they talk about a mighty king. And because we know who the victor is, because we know Daniel said 2, 7, and 8, so we know who the victor is, then we know the next verse is talking about that king is talking about Greece. Okay, and then as long as the victor is there, it will continue, the pronoun will continue to talk about that victor. All right. Okay, same thing over here. In verse 11 and verse 12, you look at it, you can't link the two, because in verse 11 there were two kings, the king of the north, the king of the south, and they were fighting with great anger. Then in verse 12, he talked about he has been taken away, he shall be cast down. Who is he talking about? And so in order to understand this, we have to see who the victor is. Okay, and we know that in this particular case itself, the victor is the king of the north, so the next one must be the king of the north. Okay, so a very simple principle. Okay, when there's a battle between two countries, the winner will be mentioned in the next verse. Okay, that way when you read chapter 11, you understand it better. Okay, all right. Another principle that we have there is that after the Messiah comes, after the Messiah was born, the powers start to change. Before the Messiah appears, all the powers is talking of political military power. But once the Messiah comes, all those power that were there is more religion rather than something political or something that is military. Okay, so when you see that, then you start to understand the prophecy a little bit better. Not all of them are military. Okay, you have to see where Jesus comes, where the Messiah comes. Then you understand that the rest will be talking about religious one. Also, another very important point is this. When we talk about end times eschatological prophecy itself, we are not talking about a particular location. We are talking about global. So in verse 40, it says, at the time of the end. So that is the clue that Daniel has given to us that this is talking about last days. And therefore, when he talk about the king of the south, king of the north, it's not talking about one particular king or one particular group of people. Okay, so understanding that when we look at the rest of Daniel itself, you will have a better picture rather than get confused. Now, another thing to keep in mind is this. Daniel 8 is one vision. Okay, then Daniel tried to understand it, he couldn't. 13 years later, the angel Gabriel came up to answer his prayer. Okay, that was 13 years later. He came. And what was he doing? He was going to explain the prophecy given to Daniel in Daniel chapter 8, okay, 13 years later. All right. And then if you look 4 years later, again, Gabriel came and answered Daniel's prayer again. And again, he was explaining the previous one. So if you actually study this very carefully, and I emphasize this, Daniel chapter 8 is the visions, chapter 9, 10, all the way to chapter 11 and beginning of 12 itself is an explanation by Gabriel because Daniel couldn't understand. It took him many years to understand. The week before, I really explained about the understanding part. Okay, he understands a little bit, but he doesn't understand the rest, the Murray, the Kazoms, and so on. So it's very hard for him to understand. But slowly, bit by bit, he started to understand. And that's why it took so long. 17 years later, he goes there. Also, the other thing to take note was that in Daniel chapter 8, the visions does not start with Babylon. Yeah, Babylon was still there. There was another 13 years more, okay, for Babylon to exist. Okay, but Babylon was not in that vision. It starts with Persia. And the reason why the vision starts with Persia was because that prophecy, the 2,300 days prophecy, okay, actually starts at the time of Persia. Okay, in 557 BC. Okay, when the decree was given. So it starts in the time of Persia. That's why Babylon was left out in this particular vision. Another very important one that I want to emphasize the rule of interpretation is this. When we look at Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Daniel 8 to 12, they are looking at the same events, all the kingdoms that's coming, but they look from a different point of view. Okay, God is very good. He gave us 2 or 3 witnesses so that we can find the whole truth. Okay, so we look at whole thing. Last week I mentioned Daniel chapter 2 identify Babylon, but not the other kingdoms. Daniel 7, nothing. But when it came to Daniel 8, Daniel actually was told that the next 2 kingdoms will be Persia and Greeks, but Rome was not mentioned. Okay, so in order to understand all this, we have to look at the whole picture, 2, 7, and 8 together, different views, but same events. Okay? And then whatever interpretation we have, it must harmonize. You cannot have something for Daniel 2 and then something else for Daniel 7 that crashes. They're all talking about the same thing, so it must not crash. It must not have conflict. Okay. the other point to note is that you cannot just add any new kingdom of power, even though it's the most current. Like, for example, right now there's a war in Iran. Okay, we cannot just add Iran into the formula itself, into the prophecy, and say, oh, see, now Iran is fulfilling the prophecy, or Israel is fulfilling the prophecy. Okay, those countries are not in chapter 2, chapter 7, and not in chapter 8. So we cannot just add any power or anything inside. Then you look at the last part of the dreams. Okay, you find that there's agreement. The feet, Daniel chapter 2, the feet of iron and clay is also the same as the little horn in chapter 7 and chapter 8. Okay, and they all refers to the papacy. Now, the reason why I emphasize this is because right now in our church, there are 2 or 3 different interpretations. Okay, one group will say, oh, that is fulfilled by the Turks or the Muslims. In the last days, the Turks and the Muslims will come out and they be power. Okay, now, they are not mentioned in chapter 2, chapter 7, or chapter 8. So we cannot just push it in. Yeah, they may have something to do with the last days events, but they are not in this particular prophecy that was given to Daniel. Okay, the last power in Daniel is the papacy, not the Turks. Okay, not the Muslims. Okay, in our church itself, a lot of people are arguing about what they call the Eastern questions. I will not deal too much on that. I will talk a little bit on it, but I won't spend too much time. Okay, so this is the principle that we have. Chapter 2, chapter 7, and all the rest of Daniel must harmonize. Okay, all right, what do I mean by harmonize? Okay, we look at the prophecy, that 2, 7, 8, and 11. You notice that when we look at it, you find that all those parallel prophecies are referring to one kingdom. The head of gold, the lion is talking about Babylon. Okay, the arms, the bear, the ram is talking about Middle Persia. And notice that Middle Persia is one kingdom. Okay, there is a group of people who say that, oh, Medes is one group, then later another kingdom called the Persians. They're separate. Okay, and they do that because they when they come to interpreting Revelation, they change their interpretation. Okay, so every one of those parallel symbols represents one different kingdom, and the kingdom must be the same. Okay, there's no additional kingdom. Okay, all right, let's go to the earlier pioneers. If you actually study on William Miller's interpretations and some of James White and Ellen White interpretation on last days, you find that they talked about the same thing as what I'm talking about. Papacy is the last one. But what happened was that Uriah Smith was a very prominent editor and very prominent writer. I got his books. Okay, a lot of the details I have for chapter 11 comes from his book. However, in 1871, he started to change his view to say that the king of the north is not papacy anymore. It was Turkey. Okay, and so much so that James White was so angry with him, he wrote a very angry letter complaining that Uriah Smith was removing the landmark that was established in our early advance movements. Okay, he really went and hit Uriah Smith. But Ellen G. White says, no, you better calm down, because that is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that the church must stay united. Anyway, what James White wrote was this. He said that if the feet, okay, of the statue itself are Romans, if the beast with the 10 horns, okay, and the last part, 10 horns and the little horns, is talking about the Romans, okay, then if you look at all those prophecy, including Daniel chapter 11, it has to end with Rome. It cannot be another power that comes in and change the whole thing. Okay, it won't harmonize. And so it was that James White was very adamant about this. Okay, the last power is Rome. And we have to remember this because in our church itself, there are different groups of people coming out with different interpretations. All right, so bear in mind, all visions must be taken together. the order of the kingdoms must be the same, and it must be the same for kingdoms. Other kingdoms might come in and influence a little bit of the world politics and so on, but the prophecy is not affected by that. Okay. And in Daniel chapter 8 itself, the little horn is both pagan and paper. And I think we know why. Remember, all the visions are looking at the same thing, but from different point of view. Daniel chapter 2 is looking at the military might, the kingdom that is coming. That's Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Daniel 7 was looking at all the world events from the eyes of the Gentile. Okay, in the eyes of the Gentile, you will find that pagan and paper are two separate religions, two separate things. So it's separated in Daniel chapter 7. Okay, but in Daniel chapter 8, they look at all the events from a religious point of view, from the spiritual point of view. And in God's eyes, whether it's pagan or paper, they're the same thing. And so the pagan and the paper Rome was represented as one symbol, little horns. Okay, so once you understand why they're given, you understand. And the order is there. Okay, there is no difference in order. Order is Babylon, Middle Persian, Greece, then you have the pagan Rome, and then the paper Rome. Okay, when we go to Revelation, there's a little bit additional information, but we'll talk about it when we go there. So all the kingdom must flow according to each other. You cannot jump and move things around. And another thing is also, if you study the different Bible parts itself, you find that actually they flow nicely. Okay, here I have Daniel 11 compared with Daniel chapter 8, and you find that they follow the same sequence. They first talk about Middle Persian, then they talk about Greece, and then of course in Daniel 11 talk about the 4 Greek kings, then they go about pagan and then paper. So it's the same countries. Okay, Daniel 11 and the rest is exactly the same, nothing different. Okay, similarly, if you look at the text, it's the same thing. Okay, in Daniel 11 itself, they first talk about Persia. Okay, just like the others. Okay, and so on and so forth. So the order in Daniel 11 is the same order as chapter 9 and chapter 10. And therefore, we cannot just change it, add things by ourselves. Right? Okay. Now, this is the overview. You find that every one of the kingdom that was mentioned in chapter 2 and chapter 7 is actually put in order in chapter 11. Chapter 11, same order. So it makes things easier. When you look at chapter 11 itself, they don't break it down for you. You have to look at the rest, look at chapter 2 and chapter 7, and then you link them up and you see that they actually follow the same order as before. Right? So let's go into the thing itself. In verse 2, it says that there will be 3 kings in Persia. All right. So the order itself, first part is talking about Persia, and right now Cyrus is the ruler. And so the next 3 kings will be those 3 kings, Cambyses, Pseudos, Medes, and Darius. Now, there are a lot of details that I gave last week. So if you want to know the details of who these people are and what happens, you may want to go back to last week's recording and then you go through slowly. Okay, this week I just want to briefly go back to the whole thing. So Daniel chapter 11 verse 2 talks about Persia, the 3 kings. And what was interesting was the next king. He said that there will be a 4th king who is richer than the rest and shall stir up the realm of Grecia. And that 4th king is Xerxes. Okay, Xerxes or Ahasuerus. If you have a chance, look at Esther. You find that King Ahasuerus have a 180-day party to to get ready for a battle against the Greeks. And of course, we know that he lost. Okay. Verse 3. Okay. In verse 2, let me go back. In verse 2, the Persians and the Greeks fought. Who is the winner? Well, the winner were the Greeks. And so in the next verse, they have to talk about the next king. And they talk about a mighty king. And in this case itself, because we know the Greeks are the winner, we know therefore that it must be talking about Alexander. And so that goes into the next phase. First, they talk about Persia. Now they talk about Greece. Okay, Alexander stood up and he fought. And then they carry on with what happened in Greece. Okay, and when he, again, because Greece is the victor, so this must be talking about Alexander. When Alexander shall stand up simply means that when he becomes powerful, then he says the kingdom will be broken and divided to the four winds of heaven, not to his posterity. Okay. Now, if you look at it, he's still talking about Greece. Okay, exactly like the order that we had, Persia, and still talking about Greece. And the detail was very exact. Alexander has one son and one brother who is half retarded. But none of these two took over his place. Instead, his kingdom was broken down to among all his generals, and they were fighting for many years. I think about 13, 14 years. They were fighting. Finally, you find that they fought, and then they actually formed four different empires. So out of all his empires, they went into the four winds, north, south, east, and west. Okay, and those are the leaders: Cassandra, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy. And then these four kingdoms went and fight with each other. And slowly what happened was Seleucus came and took over the other two. And finally, we have only two kingdoms. Okay, only two kingdoms. King of the north, which is Seleucus, and king of the south, which is Egypt, by the Ptolemy. And then, like in that verse, it says that they will pluck up. So the Romans came and slowly picked one at a time and conquer them. Now, I mentioned that there were only two kings. So in verse 5 to verse 15, they were talking about a king from the north and the king of the south, and they attack and so on. Okay, so I had a chart. I found this chart over here that actually gives you the detail of who attacked who. So if you want the details, you can use this chart and then go back to last week's recording to get more details. Okay, but that's basically what is the king of the north and king of the south, they're fighting. So at that point of time, Alexander's kingdom broke into two main parts, king of north, king in the south. Okay, and the kings are listed there. Okay, here is a list of the king. The Ptolemies are the kings of the south in Egypt. The Seleucids and the Antiochus are the king in the north. Okay, and then they will be fighting each other and so on and so forth. Okay, we won't spend too much detail, but take note that all these kings, most of the kings are actually mentioned in Daniel 11. Then in verse 14, a new player came online. The new player is called the robbers of thy people. Okay, sometimes they're called destroyer or breakers. And these robbers will become great. Okay, this group of people. And last week I mentioned why. Okay, the robbers, okay, Ben simply means children. Paris means a robber, a violent one. So what happened was when Rome was started, okay, by the two brothers, they actually have a gang of murderers and robbers and so on together. And they gang together and then they become stronger and stronger and they slowly form a kingdom by itself. But they're all men. And so what happened was that when they need the woman, they go to the nearby village and robbed the village of the girls and the women. And so they're called robbers. Okay, robbers of that people. So this is now starting on the fourth empire. We already got Persia, we already got Paris, then we have Greece. So this next kingdom will be the Romans. Okay, verse 16. Okay, but he came against Antiochus, the previous king of the north. Okay, and then they fought, not fought, but actually it's more like a challenge each other. Okay? And so from verse 16 onwards, we are now looking into the new power, which is empirical Rome. So when you read the rest, you understand that now they're shifting to the next kingdom, empirical Rome. And you find that there are a few interesting things over there. First of all, Rome is no longer referred to the king of the north or the king of the south. It's a totally different power. Okay, and whenever they are this Rome is mentioned, if you read in chapter 11, they will use he who comes or the invader. Okay, someone to come and invade. Okay, so Rome is no longer king of north or south. In fact, you want to take note that the term king of the north is not used again until the verse 40 on. Okay, which means that from now, 16, 17 onwards, king of the north is no longer used to symbolize anything until at the end times. Then they use the symbol again, king of the north. And so Rome is a new player. Rome came into the scene itself and they started to gain power. Okay. Now, we learned earlier on in Daniel that Rome is broken down into pagan Rome or imperial Rome and papal Rome. So in verse 23, if you read verse 23 onwards, they're talking about the papal Rome. Okay, and I mentioned before, when Jesus the Messiah comes, the power that comes after him is religious power. They look at more of the religious side rather than just military. So when you read the rest, you see how Rome came in, and to be more precise, at this point of time, the Pope gained power. He chose the best part, okay, and so on, and he was very strong for a period of time. Okay, all right. Then the next phase after papal Rome itself, we go into the part that history calls the Dark Ages. And this is the phase that probably is the one that was referred to in Ellen G. White, that it will be repeated because of the persecution. Let's see what he says in Daniel chapter 11, verse 13. He says that the ships of Shishan will come and they will fight, okay, against the Holy Covenant. In other words, against God's people, against God's rule, okay? And they will have intelligence with people who forsake the Holy Covenant. So here we are looking at the religious power, the Pope itself. They went against anyone who has the Holy Covenant, who are holy. And they also work with people who forsake the Holy Covenant. Okay? And in verse 31, he says, and arms shall stand on his part. Okay, now what does that mean? You see, initially the church is just a church. They take care of religious powers. But from verse 31 onwards, they mention something. He said that there'll be arms, there'll be military power. What happens? Well, first of all, Emperor Justinian actually, let me see, where is it? Here, okay, here you go. 533. Okay, Justinian put the Roman bishop as the head of all the churches. They are in charge of all the religious affairs. So he was promoted, but he still doesn't have full power. Later in 508, King Clovis is the king of the Franks, okay, was converted to Christianity, Catholicism. And when he got converted, he told the bishop that he will help to defend the bishop. But there were other tribes, at least 3 different other barbaric tribes that were there. We have covered that earlier on in Daniel, the 3 barbaric tribes that were there. And they were giving the Pope a lot of problems because they don't believe in Jesus as the Son of God. They think that Jesus was created and so on. So there was a big problem with the Pope. The Pope cannot have full power until in 538. Okay, this date is something that you want to remember. In 538 itself, when they were given power, and at the same time in 538, all the rebellious barbarians were kicked out from Rome. They go to other parts of Europe, yes, but Rome was free of the of the barbarians. And so what happened? That gives the bishop full control. You see what happened was Rome, the military power, has moved its headquarters to Constantinople. And so there was no military power. And now the Pope becomes full control. He has both the church as well as military power from the Franks. Okay? And so they become powerful. And what happened was, in 538 onwards, the little horn comes and show off its power for 2,300 years. Okay, that's when the prophecy starts. 2,300 days starts in 538. Okay. All right. They mentioned that they were, let me go back to the verse itself. Here we go. Okay. He mentioned that this power here have military power. At the same time, they will pollute the sanctuary and they will take away the daily. Now, in the translation, it said daily sacrifice, but the word sacrifice was added on. It's just simply daily. Daily is actually referring to the ritual of the sanctuary. So what happened over here is that the Pope came and they desecrated the sanctuary truth. Okay. And they changed all the truths from the representation of the church itself into something else. I put it over there. We actually have covered this before. I'm just doing a quick review. So all these were the truths that were removed and falsehood was put in. Okay. Unfortunately, all this falsehood was there in the church itself. And so God has to do something about it. Okay. Right after that, the reformers came. And what did the reformers do? Bit by bit, they actually replaced the falsehood with the truth again, brought back the truth into the sanctuary. Okay. And so now the sanctuary truth has been restored, right? During the time of Reformation. When we go to the 7 churches, we'll get more detail on each one of them. Okay, all right, I already covered this one. The 3 roots in Daniel that was moved off. Okay, those are the 3 roots. And then again, the date 538. Okay, is when the time when the Pope has full power. Okay, and the Pope's power started to increase until they control everything. And for 1,260 years, okay, in our Bible, sometimes they say 3.5 years, sometimes they say 42 months, sometimes they use the phrase times, and dividing on time. They all refer to this same period, 1,260 years. And so the Pope in Daniel 11, they say that they gain power. They stamp on the church itself and they start to persecute. Okay. And then at the end of 1,260 years in 1798, the French Revolution came and captured, arrested the Pope Pius VI at the time, arrested the Pope and removed the power. And also they broke the power now. I told you that the reason why Rome was so powerful was because they got the military and the church together. Now, Napoleon, who sent his General Petia to come, they removed the military part. So the church is standing by itself. It doesn't have any power. So some dates for you to remember. Okay, starting from 538, when the church had full power and the military was given to it, they started to persecute the people. And then at the end of 1,260 years in 1798, that Pope was wounded. Okay, badly wounded. Remember this place because you're going to look at it in Daniel 11, was wounded. And if you look at this portion of the prophecy, it's actually part of the full prophecy. Okay, if you look at this one, this is a 70 weeks prophecy where the Messiah will come on the last week. Okay, and then Daniel was told that this 70 weeks is given to your people, to the Israelites. Then the rest of the prophecy here, the timeline here, is given to the Gentiles. Okay, this big line here is the 2300. Okay, so we have that portion now. The one that I mentioned is this one here. Okay, 1,260 years. Okay, it's part of the big picture, part of the 2,300 years. Okay, there will be 2 more time prophecies that our church don't really talk about, but it's there in Daniel chapter 12. We'll go into Daniel chapter 12 later on. 1,290, 1,335. Okay, so I'm putting it in the picture so you understand the part down here. Okay, let me go on. Okay, and when does the time of the end start? The time of the end starts up when the Pope was wounded, okay, in 1798. So whenever they mention time of the end, it's referring to the time after 1798. And then when they mention the term end of times, okay, there's a difference. Time of the end is after 1798. When they mention the term end of time, they're referring to the last days, actually starting from 1844 onwards. That's what Ellen G. White said. 1844 actually is already the end of times. All the events that's happening over there is actually the events that will happen just before Jesus comes again. That's the end of the times. So two terms that you have to take note of over there. Okay, time of the end and end of times. Okay, we are living in the end of times. Okay, and Ellen G. White said in the very first, in the beginning, I mentioned this. Ellen G. White says that all those scenes that were there has been almost fulfilled, but it will be repeated in our end days. Okay, like for example, we find out that the military force will support the religion, okay, in the old days. This will be repeated again. And that was why the Pope, right now the Pope is not fully healed. When they got the military power, they'll be healed and then they start to persecute again. Okay, once the church and the state unite, then you have the abomination of desolation. Okay, that is the time when the saints will be persecuted. But the good news is that when that happens a little later, the king of the north shall come to his final end and nobody can help you. Okay, so that is the gist of it. In verse 32 onwards, they talked about the reformers. Look at the terms they say. Okay, the wicked will do, the people who do not know God will be very strong and they do exploit. They will go around persecuting the people. Okay, 33 says that, where is it now? Okay, lots of the people there will fall by the sword, by the flame, by captivity, spot, and the spot for many days. The many days is 1260. Oops, I wrote a mistake there. 1260, not 1290. Okay, those were the martyrs that were killed during this period of time. And in the seven seals, you find that this group of martyrs is asking for revenge, for vengeance. But God says, no, hold on. You have to wait a little while before your brothers join you. In other words, there will be another period of time in these last days where there will be martyrs. Okay, people will fall by the sword, by the flame, by captivity and spoil. It will be repeated. Okay, and go on and so forth. Okay, now why do they have this persecution? Okay, because these people who are understanding, and Daniel chapter 12 says the wise will understand. Okay, the reason why God allowed this persecution was to test and to purge and to make his people white, okay, to be pure, so that they will be ready again. When Jesus comes back, they'll be ready. So that's the reason why he allowed the people to go through that problem. Okay, so the Dark Ages, the reformers came. Okay, you read in great controversy, all the names of all those. Okay, the Reformation took place, the reformers came out and started to change and put back the truth. Okay. Then when you talk about the end of time, verse 36 onwards, they're looking at the Antichrist. Okay, if you read all those verses there, they are talking about Antichrist itself, and this Antichrist shall make himself great, magnify himself. So again, they follow the same schedule that we mentioned. Okay, first the Persian, then the Greece, then pagan Rome, paper Rome, and then in paper Rome itself, they talk about Antichrist coming in the last days. Okay, all right, let's go on. And just a few interpretation here. When they talk about the king now, the king is the little horn. Last king will be the little horn of the papacy. And this papacy will make himself above the place of God. He make himself to be higher than what he is. And he opposes God. How? By putting away God's law and also claiming that they have the power to make new laws for his kingdom. And of course, we understand about the stable change from 7th day to the 1st day. That's what he was doing. Okay. All right. Now, in the paper room itself, verse 37, they do not regard any gods, and they were forbid to marry. Okay, so again, these are all fulfilled by the Catholic Church. Right? And then it says they have strange gods. Okay, they got images and so on. They got strange god that is there. So verse 38, no, 36 to 39 is talking about the Antichrist, the papacy, how they go against God himself. Okay, this is the best part. Okay, verse 40 to 45 is something that we're going to see in the last days, repeated in our days. Okay, it says here, at the time of the end, that is when the time was finishing, the king of the south shall push at him. Him refers to the previous verse, king of the north. So the king of the south will come and attack the king of the north. And then they stop down there for a little while. And then the king of the north will come against like whirlwind and so on and so forth. So who are they talking about? Okay, they're talking about the time of the end from 1798 onwards. And if you read it very carefully, the king of the south shall push. Now the word push sounds like I'm pushing you, you're pushing me, pull and pull. Actually, if you look at the Hebrew word, it means not just pushing, but killing. You take a knife and you poke, you gore at somebody, you kill the person. So what happened over here was the king of the south dwelt a deadly wound on the king of the north. Okay, that sounds very familiar, doesn't it? We just covered a little bit of that. It's a repeat. So the king of the north will receive a deadly wound. But what happened was that later on, the king of the north recovers. And when the king of the north recovers, what happened? They will go down south and they will attack the king of the south. Okay, they will attack the king of the south, and it's very interesting language over here. The king of the north shall come against him, that's the king of the south, like a whirlwind with chariots and with horsemen and many ships. Now, if you actually study this very carefully, whirlwind has to do with the air. Chariot has to do with land. Horses have to do with land. Ship has to do with the sea. So what we are looking at over here is that the last day, in the last day, the king of the north, the papacy, will come with the full military might, land, air, and sea, full force to take over the countries over there. So we have to be careful. Once that king of the north heal, this is what's going to happen. Okay, so yeah, let me go on. All right, so question now, who is this king of the north? All right, if you look at and study carefully, the persecuting power that we mentioned before is the papacy. So the king of the north has to be the papacy. Later, when you go into Revelation, you find out about the 42 months, the 1,260 years. Okay, all these are the same thing, where the power at that time will actually persecute the two witnesses until the two witnesses die. Okay, and that was in the past. And then at the end of this one, the two witnesses was resurrected. And then the French Revolution came and they stopped the papacy in 1798. Okay, in 1798. So the French Revolution is a very vital part. They are the one who started off, King Clovis started off supporting the Pope and then get him into power. Now it was against the French. Again, the French, they actually stopped the papacy into power. Quite an irony. Okay, but that's what happens. Now, if you want to have a little bit more details, I would encourage you to actually go into great controversy. Okay, because Ellen G. White has actually written her great controversy according to the same timeline as Daniel 11. Okay, and if you start from page 265 to 288, they start with the French Revolution, and that was what Daniel 11:40, the first part, is talking about. Okay, where the king of the north, the king of the south went and give the king of the north a deadly blow. So that's where it starts. So when you want to know more detail about Daniel 11 itself, I will encourage you to look into the great controversy to study. And if you want, you can take a screenshot or to look at it later on, look at the recording later on, and then you study those pages, because those are the pages that give you more detail regarding those verses over there. This is what happened in the last days. This is another page. Okay, continue until Daniel chapter 12. Okay, and then in Daniel chapter 12, they tell you the main events. Michael shall stand up, there'll be a time of trouble, there'll be a special resurrection, and so on. So all these are found in the great controversy. Put some time and study those pages, okay, because those pages are exactly what Daniel verses 11:40 to 45 is talking about. Okay. Now, history will repeat itself, so you will find that it will repeat many times. Okay, if you remember the story of Babylon in the beginning, okay, what happened was Babylon was a new power at that time. Nebuchadnezzar was a king before Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, he was a new king. And because he was becoming a new power, the Middle Eastern countries, Judah and Syria and so on, were afraid. Israel wanted to combine the northern kingdom, okay, whatever is left, and Syria wanted to combine with Judah to fight against Babylon. But Judah says no. Judah instead make a deal with Egypt, Pharaoh. Egypt is in the south. Okay, and according to history, what happened was the Pharaoh took his army, the king of the south took his army up to want to control the king of the north. And so they went all the way up to Carchemish, to Euphrates River. There was a big battle. Okay, the king of the south thought that he will win, but eventually what happened? The king of the north won. And then because he won, he came all the way down. Nebuchadnezzar came all the way down and conquered Jerusalem. And that was the time when Daniel was taken captive in 605. Okay, so this history was actually a repeat of what happened in Babylon. Okay. And again, another part that was repeated was this. During the king Belshazzar, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, when he was ruling, remember we studied about it in chapter 5. Okay. Something that was similar to what you will find in these few verses. News came from the north and the east. Okay, he heard news that the Medes are coming, that's on the north, and the Persians are coming. And so the father, Nabonidus, wanted to go out to stop them from coming forward. Again, it was a repeat, because in Daniel chapter 11, the last part, again, news on the north and the east, okay, infuriated the beast. Okay. Now, I mentioned this just now, that the whirlwinds represents the air, the land, the chariots, the horsemen represent the land and the sea. So in the last days, you have the whole army coming in. But I mentioned that in the last days, it's not literal. It might happen literally that such a thing will happen, but it's more symbolic. Okay, because when we go into Revelation chapter 12 and 13, you find that Satan will come as a dragon. Then he had this sea beast and this land beast that were fighting with him. Okay, three of them. Okay, now the dragon comes from the air. The second beast came out from the sea. The third beast came out from the land. Okay, so can you see that link? So in Daniel 11, it's talking about in the last days, we'll be fighting against the power of the dragon and the beast. And that's why when we go on to chapter then Revelation 12 and 13, you get more detail. And then we are told in Daniel chapter 13 that the beast was wounded and then it will heal again. And when it heal again, they will come charging into God's kingdom. Okay. All right. History will repeat. Military force and the papacy itself, King of the North, will unite. And we've seen it before. Okay, the presidents, Reagan and Pope John Paul, they combined together and caused the Wall of Berlin to fall. So when the church and the state combine, they are very, very powerful. In the last days, when they join, it will be the abomination of desolation. That is when the Sunday laws will be actually imposed on the people. Okay. And then what happens? He says that, and that is the king of the north, has defeated the king of the south, and he come down. And as he comes down in history, when they come down, they have to go to Egypt, they have to pass through Israel. And so in verse 41, it says, you shall enter into glorious land. Okay, remember that this is for the last days. So the glorious land is not Israel itself, but actually it refers to the Christian land, the Christianity. Okay, and when he came in, he started to overthrow those kingdoms. But there are some that escaped: Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Okay, you don't hear of Edom or Moab anymore. Okay, these are all the Jordanians and the Arabians. Okay, and then one group will not escape. Egypt will not escape. Okay, Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopians. Okay, all right. So in the last days, what will happen is there will be two forces. Not so much kings, but systems of thoughts. They'll be fighting, coming across to challenge each other. The king of the south refers to the French philosophy, secularism. In the French philosophy, they believe in rationalization. They don't believe that God controls everything. It's our own logic, our own rationalization, and their philosophy will push forward. They don't believe there's atheism. Okay, and then the king of the north will be the so-called Christian groups, and they will come and they crash. And what happens when they come and attack each other? In the middle part will be the true Christians. The Christians will have to suffer. And so they'll be caught in the crossfire between the apostate Christianity and atheism. Okay, apostate Christianity refers to king of the north. Atheism is the king of the south. And Christianity will be captured or be caught in the crossfire in between. He says some will escape. Now, notice that those people who escaped that was mentioned will be Edom. Edom actually is a descendants of Red. Edom means Red, descendants of Esau. Okay, Moab and Ammon are descendants of Lot through the daughters. They are all relatives to Israel. They shall escape. In the last days, the true church, there be relatives of the true church who believe similar things as the true church. They shall escape. Not everyone will be destroyed. So there are other churches that also will be saved. They will escape the destruction. Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia, okay, will be destroyed too. And Egypt, of course, we know Egypt is one of the first kingdom that goes against God. Did they ask the question? The Pharaoh asked the question, who is God that I should obey? Okay, they only believe what they see. In the last days, there will be supernatural miracles. And because they only believe what they can see, they will fall for it. So looking at 41 onwards, you will find that there's a part that says the king of the north come down towards south, towards the glorious land. Some people will escape, some people will not. Okay, and then we look at this one here. Okay, verse 44. As they were attacking itself, there were tidings, there were news from the east and from the north. Okay? And this tidings came and make this king of the north very angry. So angry that he want to destroy everything else, and whatever they can do, he want to destroy. So who is this? What is this news from the east and from the north? Okay, we know that Jesus is coming from east, but if you actually go into Revelation, the angels that was sealing his people comes from the east. So when Satan realized that the angels is coming to seal his people, he was very angry. He wanted to destroy as many as possible before they are sealed. Then the north. Okay, in Bible direction, sometimes they refer to the north as from upwards, okay, from above. So going north, that's going up to heaven. So heaven. And the three angels' messages and the fourth angel messages, the loud cry, are angels that descend from heaven, the north. Okay, you look at Isaiah 14:13, north is from heaven. So when the three angels' messages are caught, when the angels that are doing the sealing comes from east, three angels' messages that was caught come down from the north, Satan is very angry. In the last days, this is what's going to happen. Okay? He's not happy with the whole thing itself, and so he wants to destroy as many as possible. And therefore, we have to be careful because we are right now in that period of time, okay, where we are being sealed. Okay, all right. Good news. The last verse of chapter 11. Okay, he said that he, the king of the north, somehow he managed to overcome the king of the south. Says that he will plant his tabernacles of his temple between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. So in other words, Satan has gained power. He wanted to build his own temple, his own kingdom. Good news is this: he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So in other words, we have the good news that even though Satan looks like he is winning, and we will get a better picture when we go into Revelation. Okay, in Revelation, he said that, oh, God's people only has 144,000. Satan has 200 million people, and it seems like he's winning. Okay, but the good news is that Satan will come to an end. The church, to be more precise at this point of time, the church will come to an end. Nobody can help him. When we go to in Revelation itself, you find that in the last day, the last three plagues, okay, in the last three plagues itself, you find that the people realize that they've been conned by the church, and they turn around and destroy the church themselves. Those preachers, those religious leaders who misled them will be destroyed. This is what it says on this. All those religious leaders shall come to his end, and nobody can help him. So that is really a wonderful promise. They looks like they are winning. It looks like they are much more powerful than God's people. But the good news, they shall not succeed. Okay, God's way will always be the way that they go. Oops. Okay, and so we have the spiritual issue, and we are in that spiritual issue. Like it or not, you have signed up. So what we have to do is right now, we just have to watch out. Okay, the king of the north will gain power. In Revelation, they say that the beast will be healed. When they are healed, what does it mean? It means that they have both the church power as well as the military power. And once these two go together, they start to put out the abominations of desolation. They will start the Sunday laws. Okay, there's different stages of the Sunday laws, but you will start. The time for us to look at it and be very careful. So Revelation chapter 11, the last few verses, is something that we want to study, put our time on. And Ellen G. White says, those things that happen, it will happen again in the last days. Okay. All right, I have left out a lot of details. If you want the details of what actually happened in between, especially the first part of Daniel 11, go back to last week's recording. Okay, I've skipped that because not everybody likes details. Okay, just enough to back to you and make you happy. All right, in Daniel chapter 12 next week, we're going to look at Michael standing up. Michael shall stand up. And what is interesting is when you study Daniel, actually what God is showing you is actually Satan working, preparing his people, and then God working to get his people ready. At the end of chapter 11, we just finished that, you find Satan getting all his people ready to attack, okay, to destroy the Holy Land. Next week, when we look at Daniel chapter 12, the first part, I'll show you how God is preparing and counteracting what Satan is doing. Okay, so you will see Satan working and God working. And same thing with the later part of Revelation. In the later part of Revelation, you see God getting his people ready, Satan getting his people ready, and they're all gearing towards the battle of Armageddon. Okay, so that is the thing itself. And the best news is that God will win. Okay, anyone who has any questions or anything you want to ask to clarify? Okay, I encourage you to read the Great Controversy. I've shown you the pages. Those pages are in sequence, same sequence as in Revelation chapter 11, same sequence. Okay, so I encourage you to read that. Very interesting thing.
Thank
Okay.
you. I have a question. You keep
Eileen?
saying that the history repeat itself. Why do we need to go through so many rounds of the cycle? That how many rounds of repeat do we need to go through? What is the purpose of all those repetition?
Okay, so when Ellen G. White says that history will repeat, what has happened before will happen again, you will notice that a lot of things happen. Like, for example, okay, let me put this example. God is very fair. Okay, God is very fair. And so what happened was he gave Jesus 3.5 years to walk on the earth itself to okay, all right, 3.5 years to show the way of God. And God says, okay, if I give Jesus this time, I will also give Satan this time. And so God gave Satan 3.5 years, but his 3.5 years is 1,260 years, okay, to let Satan show what he can do to help the people. But Satan, what happened? When he got the opportunity, he went and started persecuting the people. Not that God asked him to persecute, but when he's given the chance, he will persecute the people. So persecution takes place. In the last part, just before Jesus' second coming, God is going to give Satan another chance, as well as the Christian another chance, to show the rest of the universe. If they keep Satan's law, or when they keep God's law, what will happen? What will become of them? And so in the last part of the earth history itself, the things that is happening is actually being watched thoroughly by the rest of the universe. And they're going to see if they follow Satan's way, this is the type of people that is going to happen. If they follow God's way, this is the type of people that's going to happen. And God has to let the people go through this period of time so that the rest of the universe can actually understand and fully appreciate what God is doing. And the whole thing to repeat again. Okay. Does that answer your question, or I miss your question?
I don't know, because it's all those repetition that is a different
okay, you have to
purpose
speak closer to the mic because
is all the repetition with the same purpose or different purpose? Why do we need to go through this kind of cycle again and again?
Why it goes through? Okay, the reason is because you are going through different groups of people, and the purpose is also like what you mentioned, is for different purposes. Okay, the first group, okay, in 1260 is when we go to 7 churches, you understand, is to test, to make sure that God has a firm group of people there to spread his word. Okay, so that is the first group. The later group that is coming, that it will be repeated, is to not so much to test at the same time to show the rest of the universe what is the true thing, so that the rest of the universe can decide also whose side they are on. And that's the reason why, although Satan was defeated at the cross, Satan was given that period of time so that the rest of the universe can actually see for sure and be very, very certain that God's way is the best way. So all this repetition is for different groups of people with different purposes. Okay, so the repetition is for preparing the people. And this is also very important to God because, and the angels, they are going to get a group of people to go to heaven. You cannot just pick anybody. You must have picture that it's the right group of people. Okay, what do I mean by right group of people? This group of people must be willing to give up everything for sin, even though there's so much pressure and so much wealth you can get from sinning. They have to actually be able to stand up to God's law and say, I keep God's law rather than get all the worldly pressure. Okay, so that is one of the things that, one of the criteria that they're looking for. The other one is this: if we do not know how to love God, how to love Jesus right now, make God a personal God, then when we go to heaven, we're going to live forever. If you cannot be happy with Jesus or God, it's going to be a very miserable life. And God, because He loves us, doesn't want us to go to heaven if we are miserable. It's terrible. Okay, angels do not want to have someone who is not happy, someone who is a spoil sport, someone who gives problem in heaven, because they're going to live with them forever. And therefore, they have to go through this period of testing to make sure that the right people goes to heaven. The wrong people, they will not have the chance to go to heaven. They will sleep forever. Okay, they will go through the second death. Yes, June?
I was just going to say that it's actually really fair of God to do that. I mean, can you imagine if you hate God and you have to spend eternity with Him? I think that will be more torturous than hell.
Yeah, that's why it's worse than burning in hell. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I also have another question. You say that the book of the chapter
Okay,
8 to 12.
Okay, sorry,
8 to
Eileen,
12,
can you
the Daniel 8 to 12 is being sealed. So you commented that it is sealed because, like, if it's known, then is God worried that it will be destroyed, or is it for some other reason? Why is it being sealed and not like known, make known? Is God worried that his this prophecy cannot be fulfilled if, let's say, it is all known in one shot?
Okay, the problem is your sound. Okay, comes on. Oh, I can't really fully get the picture. So can you repeat yourself? Maybe go nearer to the mic.
Is it clearer now? I'm not sure. I'm
okay, I
iPad.
can hear you louder now. Yep.
Okay, so my question is, right, Daniel 8 to 12, it's written in another language, but you also say that it is being sealed. So is God worried that his prophecy will be like destroyed or cannot be fulfilled because it is known? Is God worried that Satan is so powerful that he can spoil his plan?
Good question. Okay, I want you to notice something. In Daniel chapter 2, they mention Babylon, but they don't talk about Persia and Medo-Persia, the Medes and the Greece. Okay, why did God leave out the identity? And then verse in chapter 7, no identity. Chapter 8, he only mentioned Persia and Greece, but not Rome. You see, God knew Satan will be there to destroy. And God looked at the thing and says, he knows when is the best time to give information, when to protect, when to hold back. If Nebuchadnezzar knew that after his kingdom, Persia and Greece will be taking over his kingdom, you know what Nebuchadnezzar will do? He will go and destroy those kingdoms first. But at that time itself, Persia was still very weak. The Medes were maybe stronger at that time, but they're still very weak. And Nebuchadnezzar can come and destroy them, and then the prophecy will not be fulfilled. But when you come to Daniel 8, the kingdom of Babylon was very weak. Belshazzar is a useless king. Nebuchadnezzar enjoyed himself worshipping his sun god rather than fighting for the people. Okay, so that is why God can mention the Persian and the Greece. Okay, because he knew that the Babylonian has no power to overcome those powers that he has. Now, next question. He mentioned Persia and Greece. So when the Persian came to power, the Persians will know that the next kingdom that come out will be Greece. And at the time, Greeks, they are not united. They fight only within the city itself. So every city fights on its own. It's not united. And so at the point of time, the Persians were thought, this Greece is going to conquer us. We will destroy them first. And that is the reason why in history, you find that the Persians went many times. Okay, Darius the first, Xerxes came and tried to attack the Greece many, many times. Okay, but God knew that the Greeks are strong enough to withstand that attack. Okay, so God put it there to do that thing. So God is not afraid that his prophecy will not be fulfilled, because he knows the right time to actually tell you what to do. That is also another reason why you notice that Rome was not identified in the visions, at least not in Daniel. That's because at that time, Rome doesn't exist, and then later when it comes out, it's just a small little group of robbers, easily destroyed by the Greeks. Okay, so God knows best. He knows when to reveal information, when to hold back information. So God is not afraid that Satan will win. God knows what was going to happen, and so God actually play along with him, right? So that is the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So God is in control, right? Of the
Yes.
whole thing, because
Yeah, exactly.
he knows the end from the beginning, right?
Yes.
And so he is the one who orchestrates all these things that's happening, that happen.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So we should have every confidence in our God who knows everything.
Yeah. Remember when we started in Daniel, I told you the first 6 chapters of Daniel is very important. If you don't go through the first 6 chapters of Daniel, then the rest, you know, all the prophecy is useless. Satan knows all those prophecy. In the first 6 chapters of Daniel, Daniel is actually trying to show us the character of God. And remember the chiastic structure that we mentioned? Okay, in the center of the chiastic structure, he says that God is in dominion. God is in charge. So yeah, Magdalene. Yeah, you're right. God is in charge. Whole of Daniel, Daniel, look at the first 6 recordings. Okay, look at the character of God. You find that God is the God of love. God is the one who is in charge. And Daniel 1 especially keep telling you, God was the one who gave Nebuchadnezzar this. God was the one who give you this, and so on. So they put the perspective correct. God is the one who's doing it, not the king. Yeah.
I think God is not only in control, he is in full control of every situation that goes on, isn't it? Even in our present world, he knows. He knows everything. He knows how it's going to pan out. So this tells me that we just have to keep trusting our God's providence and his protection, and not giving into fear, whatever come what may, isn't it? And I suppose that's where our faith comes, isn't it? Faith in God, our faith. And I suppose it takes time to have a faith that doesn't fail, I know. Earlier on, we were talking about the right people being taken to heaven, right? You want to enjoy heaven, right?
Yeah.
And would the 144,000 be the right people, Wayne, to be in heaven? I mean, 144,000 would be very self-sacrificing, and for them, God is everything. They'll do anything for God. So would they be the right people actually to be in heaven?
Okay, very good. In fact, the 144,000 not only will be in heaven, the new earth, but if you read it very carefully, it says that everywhere the Lamb goes, the 144,000 will follow.
Yeah.
They will be something like the priesthood to start
Yes.
serving. So everywhere. So they have to enjoy Jesus. They have to love Jesus. Otherwise,
Yes.
every day, every second, you'll be following. Yeah.
They love not their lives unto death, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And the
This is just so amazing.
yep. Yeah, they trust God so much until God,
Yes.
Jesus actually made them perfect. After the close of
Mm.
probation, these are the group of people who will be righteous and remain righteous.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see how whether we can do it.
Just can't wrap my mind around that, you know.
No, it's amazing. It's really amazing. Yeah, I hope that when you study all this, you get enlightened. You actually feel the excitement that is there, because we are in the last days. That Ellen G. White says that all the truths that we need to know is already given to us. We have to really enjoy and really study. Otherwise, if you don't, you will not be ready for the time of trouble. And if you're not ready for time of trouble, unfortunately, you will lose out. You will fall.
Yeah, I suppose it does give us that 144,000. They do give us hope, isn't it? That there will always be hope, right? No matter what we've done, where we have been, you know, there's always hope in God.
Yeah. Next week, we find that actually there is something, another good news too. You know, some of the people, they are spreading about the second coming of Jesus, they're spreading the words, and then they die. Okay, they die without seeing Jesus coming back. You know what? In the last days, in next chapter, this group of people who've been talking about second coming and preaching about second coming and so excited about it, they will be resurrected to see Jesus coming back with their own eyes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Next week.
Well, isn't that great? You know what? People nowadays, I hear people say, oh, you say God is coming back.
Oh.
You know, God is coming back. But when is he coming? You know, the skeptics are always doing that. And then I suppose that's where that verse comes in, you know, to God, 1,000 years and one day, and one day will be 1,000 years, because God is not limited by time like we do.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, again, he is so great. He, you know.
Yeah. Okay, I was just reminded. Next week, I won't be able to put up the lesson. Next week, I'll be traveling out. Okay, so may not be able to reach on time. So we will take a break next week, and then we continue the week after in June. Okay, so next week there won't be any study. We postpone 1 week, and then the following week. So the following week we'll look at Daniel chapter 12, the last book of Daniel, and there are lots of encouraging things over there that we want to look at. So, okay. Any other thoughts that you want to share? It's good that you're sharing your thoughts with us, because if you don't share your thoughts, then it's very hard for me to gauge where you are. Okay, questions, I cannot answer the questions, but whatever I can, I help you. If not, then what we will do is we will find a time to study together. Okay. All right. There's a question on the chat itself. Okay. Next week we take. Yeah. Okay. Are we going to continue Revelation? I don't know. Up to you. Okay. I will encourage you to continue, because next week I'll show you why. Because we have chapter 2, chapter 7, chapter 8 to 10, chapter 8 to 11, the prophecies. But it's not complete. Okay, it's not complete, because Daniel, when he's looking at the future, he only see a certain portion. I'll show you the diagram again next week. Okay, he can't see what's happening in certain parts. And so to get the full picture, Daniel will be a good thing to study into. Okay. And we use the same principle as what we do in Daniel. Okay. 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets. They're all parallel. All right, so next week you don't have any session, the week after we'll do Daniel chapter 12, and then if you want to continue, then we'll continue with Revelation. Okay, if you want to put it in the chat or something so that we know whether you want to continue. Okay, but I encourage you to continue because there's a lot of wonderful truths inside there. Okay, yep, June, I got your message. For you, we will help you continue. Yeah, anyone else has any questions? Now, like I said before, a lot of things some of you have not even thought about. Some of you already got a lot of information. So as you go through anything that is conflicting, anything that's disturbing, anything that is you're not sure of, let me know. Okay, put it into the group itself, put the question in there, and then we'll answer it over there if you have. Okay, so don't be afraid to ask questions, because if you don't ask questions, nobody knows whether you understand or you don't understand. Okay, the reason why I'm repeating some of those things from last week is because I got the feedback that many of you didn't fully understand what I was talking about last week. Okay, but for those of you who miss it, I would advise you to go and look at the recording, because I have given all the details in there. You just have to slow down the recording, pause it, and then read all the information. Okay, there's so much more things there is. Okay, if there are no more comments, no more questions, okay, you're close with a word of prayer, then no more last chance. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you that you've given us warning before the thing happened. You have told us what's going to happen, and you know exactly what's going to happen. Even though Satan tries his very best, in his fury, he tries to destroy as much as he can. But we know that in the final say, in the final analysis, you will be the champion. And because you have won the battle, you have shown us the way your truth, your word will be done. And so help us to believe, to trust in you, and to be ready to enjoy the heaven that you have for us. So be with us as we finish off. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.